The rain poured over the city like it had a score to settle. Under the weak shelter of a bus stop, Mira clutched her stomach, 6 months along and counting, while her fingers trembled around a styrofoam container of cold rice. The food stall that once helped her survive had been shut down 3 weeks ago, and the man who'd promised her forever vanished the moment she told him about the baby. Now she had nothing. No family. No home. Just a child on the way and a city that didn't care. It all started with love, or maybe a premature illusion of it. Mira and Justin had been in a relationship that felt like forever. They didn't have much, but one thing they did have was love, and for a long time, that was enough. Their happiness lived in the small things: long walks after Mira's shifts, shared meals under the stars, laughter in the face of hardship. But everything changed the moment Mira told Justin she was pregnant. Mira worked as a hawker, selling fruits on the roadside for her bitter, sharp-tongued aunt. The woman treated her more like a servant than family, barking orders from morning until night. One morning, as Mira was washing a fresh batch of oranges and pawpaws, a sudden wave of nausea hit her. Her stomach churned violently, and she felt an urgent need to use the restroom. Dropping the half-washed fruit into the basin, she clutched her abdomen and rushed toward the tiny, poorly kept bathroom behind the stall. The restroom door creaked as she pushed it open, barely making it in time. Mira knelt by the cracked toilet bowl, the cold cement floor biting at her knees. Her body trembled as she retched, the sour taste rising in her throat. When it was over, she sat back against the wall, breathing heavily, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She knew what it meant. It wasn't the first time it had happened that week. Her period was a month late. Her breasts were sore, and lately, the smell of fried plantains made her gag. Deep down, she had known for a while. But now, it was undeniable. She was pregnant. Tears welled up in her eyes, not entirely from fear, but from uncertainty. How would she tell Justin? Would he be happy? Would he panic? They had spoken about a future once: kids, a home, freedom from struggle, but it always felt like a dream just out of reach. She cleaned up quickly, splashed water on her face, and returned to the fruit stand. Her aunt was already scowling at her. "What took you so long, N? You think the fruits will wash themselves?" Mira mumbled an apology and resumed her task, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind replayed the same question: what now? Later that evening, under their usual meeting spot behind the old church. He was waiting for her, leaning against the brick wall with that boyish grin she'd fallen in love with. "Here comes my pride," Justin said teasingly as Mira approached. She smiled, but anyone looking closely would see it didn't quite reach her eyes. Justin's expression softened. He stepped closer, placing the back of his hand on her forehead. "You're burning up," he said with concern. "Your temperature is high. Wait here, let me go buy you some medicine." "No, Justin, it's not what you think. You're just stressed out," he insisted gently. "You've been working too hard. Come on," he bent down, lowering his back in front of her. "Climb on, let me carry you home." "Justin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He paused, still crouched, waiting. "I'm not sick," she said slowly, her hands trembling. I'm pregnant." Justin froze. Slowly, he straightened up and turned to face her. "What did you say?" he asked, though he'd heard her perfectly the first time. "I'm pregnant," Mira repeated, her voice cracking slightly. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for any flicker of understanding or comfort. But all she saw was shock. He took a shaky step back, running both hands through his hair. No, Mira, this can't be happening." Her heart dropped. "Justin, please. I didn't plan this either. But it's real. I need you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Need me? Mira, we don't even have enough to eat most days. I live in a room that leaks when it rains. You hawk fruits for your aunt who treats you like trash. And now a baby." She stepped toward him. "We can figure it out together, we always have." "No," he snapped, louder than he meant to. Mira flinched. He ran a hand through his hair again, his voice softer but firm. "Mira, you have to think about this. Maybe, you should consider aborting the baby. We're not ready for this." It's the only way to keep our lives from falling apart. Tears welled in Myra's eyes. I can't. This baby is mine, Justin. He looked away, conflicted. I'm sorry, but I just can't do this. I'm not ready to be a father. We're not ready. She stepped closer, voice trembling. So you want me to do this alone? He shook his head. I need time. Space. Please understand. She swallowed hard, a cold weight settling in her chest. You're really walking away? He didn't answer. He just turned and walked off into the fading light, leaving Myra standing there, alone, with her trembling hands wrapped around her stomach. The cold evening wind bit at Myra's skin as Justin's figure disappeared into the growing shadows. For a long while, she stood still, unable to cry, unable to move. It was as if her body had locked itself into place to keep from breaking. But eventually, the city reminded her of its indifference. A car backfired in the distance. Somewhere, someone shouted. The bus stop flickered under dying fluorescent light. Myra turned back toward the direction of her aunt's stall. But she didn't go there. Not anymore. Not after the confrontation 3 days ago, when the older woman found the prenatal vitamins hidden in Myra's bag and exploded into a storm of fury. A useless girl with no sense. You've brought shame into my house. She had kicked Myra out that night, her voice echoing in the narrow street for all to hear. Neighbors had peeked from windows. One had shaken his head. Another whispered to his wife. No one offered help. No one ever did. As she stood in front of her food stall, padlocked, silent, and already gathering dust, Myra felt her throat tighten. The once vibrant little corner where she served steaming rice and fried yams to hurried workers now stood like a grave. It had been closed for weeks. Rent overdue. Dues unpaid. No leniency. She had scraped and fought to build that stall. Selling off her few clothes, doing extra work at night markets. That stall had been her last thread of independence. Now it was gone. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Not anymore. Maybe her body had run out of them, or maybe it had simply learned there was no point. Months ago, when her aunt had thrown her out, she found shelter in an unfinished building at the edge of town, 3 cracked walls, no doors, no light. Just a bare concrete floor and a piece of old foam she found by a refuse dump. She still lived there, wrapping herself in a torn curtain at night to keep the mosquitoes off. She waited outside the stall all day, hoping that the owners would show up. Maybe they'd change their mind. Maybe they'd let her work on credit, just 1 more week. But no one came. Just the rain, the heat, and the slow hunger curling in her belly. As dusk fell, Myra picked up the empty food container she'd been carrying since morning and began the long walk back home. The city moved around her in indifferent rhythm, the Danfo buses honking, vendors calling out, lovers laughing under umbrellas. Life went on. Her mind swirled with everything and nothing, her baby, the future, the loneliness pressing down like a stone. She didn't hear the sound of the approaching engine until it was too close. Headlights flared. A sharp horn. Then, a jolt of panic shot through her as she turned, but her feet were too slow. A black Benz swerved wildly, trying to avoid her, but not in time. The metal clipped her side with a sickening thud. She spun and crashed onto the wet pavement, the container of rice flinging from her hand, scattering like broken promises. The world tilted. Sounds warped. All she could hear was the blood pounding in her ears and the cries of bystanders rushing forward. Her last conscious thought before everything faded was of the baby. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. Please, she whispered, don't leave me too. Then darkness. The beeping was the first thing she heard. Soft, rhythmic, like a distant voice reminding her she was still alive. Myra blinked, her eyes open slowly. The ceiling above her was white, blindingly white, and the air smelled like antiseptic and plastic curtains. She tried to move, but a dull pain shot through her side. Panic surged. Her hands flew to her stomach. Flat. Her belly was flat. A choked cry escaped her lips. No, no, no. A firm but gentle hand caught hers. Stop. It's okay, a voice said, deep, steady, unfamiliar. She turned her head to see a man sitting at her bedside, his face pale with concern. Tall, well-dressed even in a wrinkled white shirt, his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Your baby's fine," he said quickly, as though he'd anticipated the question. "Alive. Just in an incubator. The accident, it forced an early delivery, but the doctors acted fast." Myra's chest rose and fell rapidly as she absorbed his words. "She's alive?" He nodded. "Fighting. Like you." Myra exhaled, the breath coming out in sobs as tears streamed down her face. Relief and disbelief battled within her. "I'm Jerry," he said softly, still holding her trembling hand. "I was the one driving." She turned away, unsure of what to feel. But there was no anger in her, only exhaustion. The days that followed. Recovery wasn't easy. Her ribs were bruised, her left leg fractured, and her spirit still healing. But every morning, Jerry returned. Sometimes with flowers. Other times, silently with a coffee in hand, always waiting for permission to sit. She learned things slowly. That Jerry was a billionaire, the kind featured in magazines, the type whose name opened doors. But he didn't behave like the world expected. There was no arrogance in his tone, no pity in his voice. Just a kind steadiness she hadn't known in years. He paid the hospital bills without fanfare. When he learned she had no home, no family, he offered her space in his mansion. "Just until you recover," he said. But his eyes said something else, something unsure and searching. The mansion was a different universe. Marble floors, rooms that echoed, soft sheets she didn't want to touch for fear of staining them. But in the quiet, warm kitchen over evening tea, or by the fireplace where she read, the two of them began to talk. Myra told him everything. The fruit stall. The aunt. The boy who promised forever and left when life got real. "I was stupid," she said one night, staring into her mug. "I thought love meant sacrifice. Turns out, I was the only one sacrificing." Jerry leaned back, his voice low. "That wasn't love. That was you carrying both of you alone." The weeks that followed. They visited the baby often. A fragile little thing in the NICU, her chest rising and falling with tiny effort. Myra cried the first time she saw her. "She's so small," she whispered. Jerry placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "She's strong. Like her mother." Each visit grew into a ritual. Jerry held Myra's hand as she hummed lullabies. The nurses began to smile whenever they came. Some whispered about them. Myra overheard once and flushed, but Jerry only smiled and said, "Let them talk." In the quiet spaces of healing, between pain meds and slow walks, shared stories and silent glances, something bloomed. Love. Not the desperate, naive kind. But a gentle, grounding one. Born from safety. From listening. From showing up. It is just a month left, now, as Myra sat by the window of Jerry's study, staring at the pink sky of early evening, her thoughts rested on the day they'd bring their daughter home. "She'll be ready in a month," the doctor had said. "Healthy. Gaining weight." Jerry stepped into the room with 2 mugs of cocoa and handed her one. She looked up at him, her face tired but radiant. "You ever think this is crazy?" she asked, half smiling. "A girl from the roadside, and a man who lives in a mansion." He sat beside her. "I used to think I had everything," he said. "Turns out, I didn't know what everything was until I nearly lost you." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for his hand. And outside, the rain began again, but this time, it felt less like punishment and more like a promise. The day they brought their baby home was the beginning of something new, not just for Myra, but for Jerry as well. Holding their fragile little girl in their arms, the two of them shared a silent promise to always protect her, to give her a future full of love and opportunity. For the first time, Myra felt like her life had direction. Her daughter was the bridge between her painful past and the future that she and Jerry were now building together. Every night, as Myra hummed lullabies and Jerry held their baby, they felt the weight of their past slowly dissolving into something more hopeful. As the months went by, their bond grew stronger. The love they had was no longer about survival, it was about companionship, about building something real and lasting. Jerry was patient, always there for Myra, not just as her partner, but as the man who stood by her side, sharing in the joys of parenthood. Myra, too, found herself learning how to trust, how to love without fear, knowing that Jerry would always be there for her. They grew together, as a couple and as a family. What had started as a broken promise had blossomed into something far greater. Years passed. Mira and Jerry had built a life full of love, stability, and family. But in the years that followed, Justin's life had not been as kind. Despite his initial decision to abandon Mira, he had gotten married, hoping to start a family of his own. But something was wrong. His wife, whom he had married in an attempt to recreate the life he had once thought he could have with Mira, could not conceive. Year after year, they tried and failed, and the strain of their infertility weighed heavily on their marriage. Eventually, his wife, unable to bear the heartbreak any longer, left him. Alone, Justin found himself reflecting on the past, on the woman he had once loved and abandoned. He thought of Mira, the girl with the gentle smile, the one who had once carried their child in her womb. The child who could have been his, the family they could have had. He remembered the look in her eyes when he turned away from her, and the pain in her voice as she begged him not to leave. His heart sank with the realization that the choices he had made had cost him more than just Mira. They had cost him his chance at fatherhood, his chance at happiness. Justin couldn't ignore it any longer. The regret gnawed at him. With his marriage in ruins, he set out to find Mira. He began asking around, visiting old acquaintances, trying to trace the life she had built. It didn't take long before he learned the truth. Mira had moved on. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She had remarried, this time, to a wealthy man. A billionaire. The news hit Justin hard. He could hardly believe it. Mira, the girl he had left in the dust, had found someone who loved her, who provided for her in ways he never could. She had a family now, one that was whole, one that was everything he had failed to give her. Determined to make amends, Justin traveled to the mansion where Mira and Jerry now lived. His heart pounded as he approached the grand doors, unsure of what to expect. What could he even say? Would she forgive him? Could she? When Mira opened the door and saw Justin standing there, she was struck by how much he had changed. He was no longer the young man she had once loved. His face was drawn with regret, his eyes filled with years of sorrow and self-doubt. He looked different, more mature, but still the man who had walked away from her when she needed him the most. Justin opened his mouth to speak, but his words caught in his throat. Mira looked at him, her expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Mira, he stammered. For everything. For leaving you. For not being the man you needed. I was selfish, and I've paid the price for it. His voice trembled with emotion. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret it every day. I think about you, and I think about her, our child. I think about what could have been. Mira stood silently, her emotions a whirlwind. She had thought about this moment for years, wondered if Justin would ever come to her, whether he would ever acknowledge the pain he had caused. But now, standing in front of him, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel the need to make him pay. She simply felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of the past. I've forgiven you, Justin, she said softly. I forgave you a long time ago. But what I don't think you understand is that the man you were, he doesn't exist anymore. I'm not the same girl you left behind. I've built a life with Jerry. He's my family now. He's the one who stood by me when you couldn't. Her eyes softened as she continued. I've moved on. And so has she added, referring to their daughter, now a bright, spirited child who had brought so much love into their lives. Justin's eyes flickered with uncertainty. There was one question that had always haunted him, one question he had never dared to ask. But now, standing before Mira, he couldn't hold it in any longer. Is she, my daughter? Justin asked quietly, his voice breaking the silence between them. Mira's heart skipped a beat. She knew this moment would come, but she had always hoped it would remain unspoken. She looked at Justin, her eyes unwavering. I don't know, she said softly. I don't know if she's yours. She's ours now. She's been ours from the moment I carried her. She is my daughter, and she's Jerry's daughter. That's the truth. Justin stood there, his face pale. He had learned the hard way, the child he had abandoned had become the heart of someone else's world. And in that moment, He understood the weight of his choices. He swallowed hard, nodding silently. He didn't have the right to ask for more. Justin left that day, carrying the weight of his mistakes, but also a newfound understanding. Mira closed the door behind him, her mind heavy with the past but her heart resolute. She had made peace with what was. And though she would never forget the pain of her past, she had created something beautiful in its place. As she turned to walk back into her home, her eyes found Jerry, sitting in the living room, a warm smile on his face as he played with their daughter. Mira smiled, her heart full. She had everything she needed. And with Jerry by her side, they would face the future together, a future full of love, healing, and hope. Mira had once been a food vendor on a busy street corner, her days marked by the grind of survival, selling rice, fried yams, and fruit, making just enough to get by. She had faced rejection, betrayal, and hardship, each day spent navigating the harshness of life in a city that showed her little mercy. Yet, amidst all the struggles, she never lost hope. But never, in her wildest dreams, had she imagined that love would find her in such an unexpected place. Love didn't come in the form of a promise from Justin, nor from a fleeting romance that had faded with time. It didn't come from the comforts she once dreamed of. No. Love came when she was at her lowest, alone with nothing but the child she carried in her belly. It came from a man who, despite his wealth and status, treated her with respect, patience, and tenderness. Jerry, the billionaire who could have any woman, chose her. He chose her not for her circumstances, but for who she was: strong, resilient, and capable of loving with all her heart. Mira's journey from food vendor to the wife of a man who adored her was not a fairy tale, it was real. It was messy, painful, and full of sacrifice. But in the end, it was a love that gave her everything she never thought she deserved. She had found love in an unexpected place, in the arms of a man who didn't judge her past, who didn't see her as anything less than worthy of everything good the world had to offer. And as she watched Jerry with their daughter, their laughter echoing through the house, Mira knew that love had found her when she least expected it, but it had found her at exactly the right time. The food stall, the long days of hard work, and the heartbreak were all part of the story, but they no longer defined her. Mira, the woman who had once been alone and lost, had found love in the most unexpected of places, in a home, with a family, and with a man who loved her for all she was. And with that, she realized that sometimes, life's greatest gifts come when we least expect them. Just when we think we've given up on love, it surprises us in the most beautiful way.